Used to have a musical piece here. We don't have one today, do we? Where's my buffer? You got a lot of me today, I guess, huh? Lucky you. Well, our scripture text we heard last week, so I'm just going to read a part of it again. It's from Psalm, it's not Psalm 8, it's actually Psalm 19, where I got 8 from. God's glory is on tour in the skies. God's craft on exhibit across the horizon. Madam Day holds classes every morning. Professor Knight lectures every evening. Their voices aren't heard, their voices aren't recorded, but their silence fills the earth unspoken. Truth is spoken everywhere. God makes a huge dome for the sun, a superdome. The morning sun, a new husband leaping from his honeymoon bed. The day-breaking sun, an athlete racing to the tape. That's how God's word vaults across the skies, from sunrise to sunset. Melting ice, scorching deserts, warming hearts to faith. Amen. Beautiful words about the cosmos, the earth, and all that is so beautiful in this world. So back in early January, well, thank you, Casey, of the year of our Lord, 2022, just like to say that, I started my sermon talking about an amazing thing that happened just a few weeks prior, no less than Christmas morning, in fact, when the darkness of the night gave way to the early light of the morning, and as Santa Claus was finishing his rounds, delivering toys to, what does the song say? Every good girl and good little boy, right? Is the great Christmas song. It tells us a streak of fire and light broke the silence of Santa's journey as a powerful rocket blasted up from a global space center named Kourou in French Guiana on South America's northeast coast. It's Christmas morning. Well, I talked about how this was no ordinary Christmas morning rocket that went up that morning, maybe carrying presents to the space station, right? The International Space Station, or maybe another communication satellite, or God knows what else they're putting up there in space. We have any idea. No, the payload on this Christmas morning rocket was a kind of a gift to all of us, a gift to science of a different kind. It was a dream, actually, that had its beginning way back in the year 1996 when a team of international astronomers and scientists decided that, the Hubble telescope, it's really, really neat, right? It's doing some pretty cool things, right? But in Larry David-like fashion, they said, we can do better. We can do better. And with that, those of you that have seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. And with that, the dream that would become the James Webb telescope was born, and a new path to the galaxies and the stars, and maybe all the way to the Big Bang itself was charted. The mission statement of this new telescope was this: the James Webb Space Telescope is the world's premier space science observatory. Webb will solve mysteries of our solar system, look beyond to distant worlds around other stars, and probe the mysterious structures and origins of our universe and our place in it. End quote. That's the mission of the James Webb. So on that Christmas morning, 7 months ago, the James Webb Telescope, so named after James Webb, if you hadn't figured that out yet, once visionary administrator of NASA, was launched, and its mission into orbit began with its 1 million mile journey from the Earth out to where it would unfurl its giant mirrors and begin to show us some pretty amazing things in the universe. So I made back then when it launched that we would return to the story of this telescope as soon as it began to send back from 1 million miles away images that were taken of objects billions of light years away. Does that even make sense to your mind? If I say 1 billion light years, do you have any idea what that means? Some of you might be really smart. You might get that. I had to take my shoes off to do the math on that. It was crazy. So they were hoping for March to release these images, but it took a little bit longer, so with some patience, eventually they came out. And just a few short weeks ago, if you've been following the story, the first images came back, and they have taken the astronomical and the scientific world by storm. I mean, blew them away, producing images far greater in detail than the Webb developers had ever hoped for. And that's just in the first couple weeks. They haven't even honed this thing yet. If you've seen any of these, the images and the facts around them are just mind-boggling, and they can take our imaginations to new heights never experienced before if we will let them. Hang on to that, because that can be a really hard thing, especially for religious folks to do, to let their imaginations wander. All right. For instance, I joked last week. All right, I was having a little fun, right? That this is a James Webb. I've seen it a million times. I still laugh every time. The old one was the Hubble. They called it the Horsehead Nebula. Look at what James Webb discovered. I mean, it's actually a horsehead. That's incredible. Who knew the universe with such precision? But it gets better, folks. There's more. I mean, look at this one that the James Webb telescope found. I mean, look at that. Who knew? Bernie Sanders out there just sitting on some planet 10 billion light years away. He does get around, doesn't he? He always has that frothy look. I don't get it. So, there's one. I mean, you got others. You look at this one very closely. I mean, this one shocked me. You always wonder, where's Waldo? Well, there is Waldo just walking in this nebula. I mean, it's really quite crazy. And then this next one, the final one. I'll stop because I know you think, Mike, you're getting really corny here. This one just blew me away. This is Hillary's emails. It says right on there, Hillary's deleted emails. The Webb found them. They're going into this black hole, and they're about to disappear forever. Thought they were gone, but James Webb Telescope found them before they disappear forever. It's all about her emails, right? Thanks, James Webb. In all seriousness, there have been some simply stunning images in the very first week of the Webb that I want to share with you. The first one, the deepest and sharpest image ever, is the deepest and sharpest image ever taken of the universe in history. In history. Think about that. No, this is not a joke. This is real. I mean, this is the deepest look into space we've ever had in our existence as a species. And it just happened 3 weeks ago. At least it was released 3 weeks ago. So see that side over the big side? Hold your hand out for me for a second. Just hold your hand out. Don't hit the person in front of you. Hold your hand out. Kind of pretend you have a grain of sand. One tiny grain in your fingers. Now look at it. That's the size of the piece of sky that the James Webb Telescope was aiming at. Think about that. Contained in that one tiny grain of sand snippet, there are, held at arm's length, you're looking at thousands and thousands of galaxies. And that one little grain of sand, and within each of those galaxies, look at them, each one. Within each of those, there are hundreds of billions of stars. In each galaxy, think about that. One grain of sand, hundreds of billions of stars, thousands of galaxies. It's estimated that our own galaxy, what's it called again? Thank you, off to the candy bar, obviously. Contains between 200 and 400 billion stars. Just our galaxy. Let that sink in for a moment as you look at the thousands of galaxies in this tiny little grain of sand snippet of the universe. And think about it, the light that is reaching us from those galaxies now is about 4.6 billion years old. Wow. This is taking the scientific world by storm. We may not quite get it yet, but it really is. They say this is just the beginning of how the Webb telescope is going to function. This is just its infancy, and they expect incredibly more detail, incredible amount of more detail to come over just this one very image in the near future. I wonder how many of you recognize this. I guarantee you've all seen it. You've all seen it many times. Usually, I'll give you some hints, usually around Christmas. And it twinkled. And it was part of a movie where there were a cluster of angels. If you haven't gotten it yet, I'll give you a hint. It's a Wonderful Life. Those are angels up there talking about George, and what was the guy's name? Clarence? Was he a clockmaker or something like that? Who just couldn't get his wings, right? Poor Clarence couldn't get his wings. So they used this very group of bright stars and cluster to use as the angels. It's a Wonderful Life. Well, this cluster is actually, there you go, I forgot to put up a graphic. It's actually called Stephen's Quintet. And this is what it really looks like, according to the most recent photograph from the Webb. Now, this cluster of 5 galaxies lies 40 million to 290 million light years away, or as NASA calls it, pretty close. Really? According to a space website I was perusing, they said, quote, in the beginning of the 1946 holiday film classic, It's a Wonderful Life, angelic figures take on the form of a famous group of compact galaxies known as Stephen's Quintet. In reality, these galaxies aren't so heavenly. Pictures from NASA's Hubble space and now the Webb, in more detail, show that Stephen's Quintet has been doing some devilish things. At least 2 of the galaxies have been involved in high-speed hit-and-run accidents, which have ripped stars and gas from neighboring galaxies and tossed them into space. Whew. Stephen's Quintet is a bit of a troublemaker, it appears, but that is not all that unusual for the power of the cosmos around us. But it's not just the power, save this, it's also, how about the beauty? Just look at that for a second. How about the beauty? I showed this one earlier with Waldo. And you've likely seen it elsewhere. It's called the Carina Nebula, and it's a stellar nursery where the births of stars actually take place within its dust and its gas mountains. Some of those mountains rising as high as 7 light years. 7 light years tall. Think about that. I mean, if you can. Think about that. And just a little thing on a light year, I had to do some math here. Actually, I had to rip off scientists on Google. But same thing, right? A light year is 5.9 trillion miles. That's 1 light year. So the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across. Our galaxy, 100,000 light years. So I had to actually turn my iPhone on its side to use the calculator app because you can't get enough zeros across when it's landscape, or no, portrait, whatever. Had to turn it sideways to get all the zeros. It still couldn't fit all the zeros on there. So if you multiply 5.9 trillion miles, 1 light year, times 100,000, you get something. Maybe there's some math person out here that can help me. 5e17. What does that even mean? I have no idea, but is it 27 zeros? Is that what it is? That's a lot of space, isn't it? That's just the Milky Way. Anyway, that's just our galaxy. It is said that this nebula alone will provide astrophysicists and astronomers with never-before-seen data on the formation and the birth of processes by which these violent, massive gas clouds and dust churn them out before they become the future of galaxies and other stars. Is it octillion? Yeah. I don't get it. Poof! And beyond birthing stars, however, this nursery just shows us, my God, just look at it, my friends, incredible beauty, even amidst all of the chaos that goes around us. There's just so much beauty. I am in awe. I hope you are too, of what the Webb telescope has brought us in its very, very young infancy, and excited to see what news and views it will bring us about our universe as its full power is unveiled and turned on the universe and utilized for all to see. Peering back in time to long ago places, give or take 100 million or 10 billion years, or even, I'm going to say this, before the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang. Not to the Big Bang, but before the Big Bang, or whatever the heck transpired then. Do we really know? I mean, come on, it's mind-boggling. My hope is that you, all of you, will keep paying attention to this. We need to keep paying attention to this stuff, because in it can lift us to new dimensions. It can heighten our spiritual lives in ways we've never really been given the freedom to imagine. And you know why that is? Because our spiritual lives were never here. They've always been in a book from long ago. And that's where I want to go. So I find that really sad. Nowhere in this day and age, leaving the web for a moment, are we being called to adjust our vision more so than when it comes to our religions, our faiths, and our tiny, teeny, tiny, minuscule, and all too earthly visions of that which we name God, specifically the God of the Bible. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to lay it out there. Specifically the God of the Bible, the tribal, earthly, and all too limited God of very earthly, limited religions. This became more clear to me than ever, as I recounted last week when we were driving through the heartland of this beautiful nation, and we just kept seeing all those signs, you know? We're just talking about those signs. We didn't see many of those in Vermont, but we sure saw them through the middle of this country, and all we did was encounter this little puny, outdated, tribal, and judgmental attributes to the God that so many in this nation ascribe to. Ugh. On the way home, driving those interstate roads, even with my COVID brain, I had my phone out. I wasn't driving. I was a passenger, of course. After Webb's first photos were released, going through the heartland, and I'd be holding my phone in one hand, looking at images like that. Some of the most awe-inspiring things I've ever seen photographed in my life, in history. And there I am driving by these signs. Again, I can't get these signs out of my mind. That said awful things about believing in Jesus and salvation, or you're going to go to hell, wherever that is. James Webb's going to find it maybe eventually. I don't know. I doubt it. I'll say more about that in a second. Just ugly threats that are just so unnecessary in this day and age. And God and the infallibility of the Bible and sin, and judgment and wrath, it's all it was. It's never a mention of, as I said last week, beauty, compassion, or love when it comes to God. It leads me to ask the question, why are so many seemingly good people locked into this prison of this wrathful, vengeful, just waiting to punish people for their non-belief, or their willingness to question big things, or their freedom to think just a bit differently, or their apparent difference from those who put up those hateful God signs in the first place? On our vacation through those lands we drove, and well beyond them, it's not just there, it's all over. It became clear that the stench of biblical inerrancy, biblical literalism, and biblical certainty is doing real massive damage to people's spiritual lives and blocking them from opening themselves to the wonder and awe of things like the universe that's coming alive and around us in so many amazing ways through science, through modern science. The Webb photos are, this is what some of the things I read. I went to the detractors. I don't know why I do this. The Webb photos are neat, they say, but they're meaningless because all that matters is what happened in that mishmash of books that were written centuries ago. I heard that over and over again. Don't look at the photos of the Webb telescope. This is a quote from one, just go back to Adam and Eve. Don't look at this stuff, or look at it and just enjoy it as pretty, but then go back to Adam and Eve. Don't let your faith be shaken by these photos from space. This is what it said. Go back to the first couple. First couple. The first couple, Adam and Eve.
The first couple was in the White House.
Well, that was my first thought too. What does the White House have to do with this first couple? I read many Christian reactions to these photos, and so many began with just that, or something like they're just photos, they're colored, and they're neat, but we don't need to look past Jesus and his salvation to find the heart of our faith. It didn't surprise me, all the detraction. There's a lot of it out there. You can go find it yourself later. But why can't these photos, this is my question, and other major scientific findings and discoveries expand, just for once, our sense of awe and wonder, and therefore maybe expand our sense of who God is in the midst of creation, in the midst of earthly life, in the midst of woo! Getting a little excited. In the midst of human life, in the midst of the cosmos, and yes, even in the midst of someday, oh my God, extraterrestrial life. Whew. You think Christian minds are being blown now threatened by colorful photos of clouds and gases? Wait till a little green man with antenna come walking on out. Or we discover that someday we're not just talking about a universe, but as many great physicists are already talking about trillions of universes. What's that going to do, huh? Just go back to the first couple. Oh my God. The Bible, one, what they're going to realize, it doesn't have an answer for that. There were no little green men in the Bible with antenna, right? At least not that I might have missed it, but it doesn't have an answer to that kind of stuff. Extraterrestrial life, multi-universes, cosmoses, all of that kind of stuff. Because it was never intended to have answers to that kind of stuff. Because you see, the Bible is a tribal book taken out of a tiny piece of the world, just like that grain of sand. Just like that grain of sand. A little corner of the world that attempts to locate a particular people's visions of God, life, relationships, laws, morals, and more, and a code to kind of live by. It's also a book that tells us a bit and fabricates a whole lot of the story of a poor preacher named Jesus and his challenge to the world of the Bible and the world outside of it, a pagan world that held him captive. It tells a tiny bit of history and attempts and fails miserably, for our sake today, at cosmology. Rather, it was more composed of myth, its mythology, its story, its law, hopes and dreams more than anything else. But we know so much more today, don't we? Can you just admit that with me? Do we not know so much more today than we did 3,600 years ago? Can we just accept that as a fact? Not an alternative fact, an actual fact? So perhaps it's time we put the Bible away. You know, when we look at the world around us, our spiritual lives, the universe around us, and the interaction of our humanity with one another and the world and the cosmos. And it's just not, I hate to say this, and I struggled whether to even say it. It's just not relevant anymore. It's just not relevant anymore. And it leads to outdated signs on quiet heartland freeways that keep people locked in an abusive relationship with a fictitious tribal god and keeps them from exploring the awe and the wonder and the raptures of the world and of the cosmos around them that we are being exposed to by things like the James Webb telescope. I hate to be so honest. I really do. But it's just so blatantly obvious in this day and age, and it's just time we name the elephant in the room. It's just time. For me. I guess my take when I look at the Webb images that are emerging and ask, what do these images do for me? Oh, who's calling in? Someone's upset. I'm sorry, God. I'm really not. Ask what these images do for me, for my spiritual life, my religious beliefs, the actual few I very hold outside of awe and wonder, is to remind myself how limiting our God of the Bible really is, how tribal and cultural and locked into a particular location, as I already said, yet, I want to qualify that. It also gives me respect for those who were creating this God. Really, it does. These gods, even in a sense, is an attempt to explain the awesomeness of the world and space as they could have understood it, back in their day. I don't begrudge them that at all for putting these words down. I honor it for their time. I really do. I mean, our Genesis folks that did the creation stories, and there's 2 of them in there, go read them. And our psalmists and other writers obviously had a real attraction to the earth and to the cosmos and its relation to holy mystery, that which we name God. And you know what they did? They did their best to voice it, to put it into words and poetry and song, not necessarily literal truths. That was never, ever their goal. Literal truths was never their goal. So I respect the heck out of those folks that crafted that stuff for us. It's beautiful. At the same time, I wouldn't trust a man from the year 1600 BCE, were he to appear in front of me right now. I wouldn't trust him to drive me to St. Pete. Just think about that for a second. And therefore, and there's many levels that I wouldn't trust him to do that.
Wouldn't trust Jesus to take the wheel.
And therefore, I also cannot take cosmological and scientific insight from this man either, that lived 3,600 years ago. I mean, I can appreciate with great respect his or her awe and wonder, like our psalmist that we heard, and the attempts of explaining the origins of and ways of creation, but I also have to take them with a teeny tiny grain of salt, a very small one at that. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, folks, I'm not saying that I'm some genius when it comes to space. I'm not saying that at all. But at least I, unlike my ancient man from the past that came here, at least I have Google, NASA.org, and Space for Dummies. He didn't have any of that. Just a healthy sense of imagination and awe and wonder to look up at the sky and envision God in relationship to it all. I respect that. I really respect that, and I find a kindred spirit, but I do not have to take those ideas literally when it comes to my opinion on God, the cosmos, and my spiritual life. Friends, I know this is long, and I haven't gotten to the heart yet. This is kind of the deconstruction phase. I haven't gotten really to the construction phase. What I want to say about the awe and wonder of the God experience and how I see the heart of that mystery here on earth in profound and amazing ways, and in the cosmos and in one another and all of creation. So next week, I want to do part 2 on this and expand this idea of the mystery that I name God, that we name God, through the lens of a couple ideas. I want these to sit with you. One is a rebirth of awe and wonder when it comes to all things spiritual. We drastically need a renewed sense of awe and freedom, religious and spiritual freedom, to be awestruck spiritually anew. That's the first thing we need. We need to put the clutter of the paradigms we've been imprisoned in away. 2 is jettisoning, and this is part of that, is the jettisoning of the tribal God of the Bible and the opening ourselves to the universal nature or multi-universal nature of that which we name God. What does this mean? I have no idea yet, but I'm going to figure it out this week without creating any God of the gaps kind of thing. It's something I'll talk more about next week. And finally, if the God of the Bible is just too outdated, conditioned, and limited for many of us, then what does that mean for our understanding of the divine experience, which I contend we, each and every one of you, are an intricate and unfolding part of? So if we put all that stuff away, which is where we need to go, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your spiritual life? Those are questions I want us to grapple with. So hang on to those cliffhangers, and we'll explore the God experience in more detail next week. And please do join me in a sermon talk back today, because I want to hear your thoughts on everything I just said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to close with a little food for thought from my favorite famed mythologist, great mythological expert of the world, Joseph Campbell. And I'm going to give you this as a little something to chew on and ponder for next week. In discussing new cosmological findings in his time around this is the time around the Apollo space program, when things were popping and new things were coming. Whoa. Campbell asked the following question. He's one of the best. He said this: what does all this new discovery do to my mythology? What does all this new discovery do to my mythology? That's what he asked. Obviously, some corrections have to be made, he wrote. He went on with an illustration. I'll leave you with. For example, it is believed that Jesus, having risen from the dead, ascended physically to heaven, that's Luke 24:51, to be followed shortly by his mother in her sleep. That he cites early Christian belief confirmed as Roman Catholic dogma on November 1st, 1950. It's also written that some 9 centuries earlier, Elijah, riding a chariot of fire, had been carried to heaven in a whirlwind. That's 2 Kings 2:11. Just so you don't think he's making this stuff up. Now, even ascending at the speed of light, for which a physical body is impossible, those 3 celestial voyagers would not yet be out of the galaxy. Those 3 celestial voyagers would not yet be out of our own galaxy. What is to be made today of such mythological, hence metaphorical folk ideas is the question he ended with. I want you to ponder that for a bit when you think of the immensity of everything that's out there. I was watching this morning, I go to this rural farm channel. Way too much information, but it's called RFD. You've probably seen it in your Comcast. And I don't know why I do this, folks. I torture myself. And they had some old-time preacher. It might have actually been Robert Jeffress. He was waving his Bible around. He was talking about Jesus coming back. And I already written this. I'm thinking, Jeffress coming back? He ain't even out of the Milky Way yet. What's he going to go? He's got to get where he's going before he comes back, right? Those are the questions I want you to ponder. And I want to leave you with one more thing. Steve Jobs used to do this. And this is about Steve Jobs. You all know who Steve Jobs is? Steve Jobs was really the founder of Apple. A true genius up there with the greats, right? A perfectionist, driven creator, a designer, an artist. It said when he died that he had some last words just before he died. And this is a man that lived awe and wonder. But he knew that in that moment when he died, there was more to come. More so than our stories could ever give us. And his words, his final words, as Steve Jobs crossed the Rubicon of life into death, as we all will do in some point in our lives, his words were, looking up, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." And he breathed his last. That is one of the most inspiring things I've ever heard of the God experience and the life experience and the totality of it all. Until next week, when we'll keep exploring this little journey, I leave you with those cliffhangers. Ponder away, my friends. Peace be with you. God be with you. Amen.